Hello everybody, welcome to this video, What 2017 Teaches Us About 2018 Onwards, looking today at Paper 2, Question 2 on the AQA English Language Exams. Now, this is my favourite question in the entire paper, and it's my favourite question because I think the wording of the question itself doesn't really point you to what you need to do to access the highest marks. And as a result, it's very easy to get low marks in this question. I'm not going to tell you everything about how to answer this question. This is just looking at what 2017 teaches us about 2018. So for how to answer the question itself, have a look at my video More Help with Language Paper 2, Question 2. The mean average mark for this question in 2017 was 3.5 out of 8. That means the average mark, the average student achieved less than half marks in this question. And that, of course, is not good enough, and we want to do better this year. So let's talk about some of the issues. So as you can see, this is a summary question. You need to refer to both sources, and in this example, which is from my revision guide, now available in paperback on Amazon, the question was, write a summary of the differences between Andrew Bruff and Edgar Thompson. Now there are a couple of issues here, and the first issue is to do with identifying clear differences. I've worked with a number of students who struggle to find differences between the two texts, and one of the things that often happens is students find something that is true in one text and then assume the opposite is true in the other text. No, you mustn't do that. You've got to look for differences that are clearly evident in both sources. Okay, so that's really important. Now you can compare ideas or textual details, it's fine, but you've got to make sure there is a clear difference between the two. So once you've been able to identify clear differences, you're halfway there. But the next part is so important, and this is a question where you have to be able to infer. Now, let me just say at this point, there will not be lots of differences to choose from. The wording of the question always has a tight focus, and that means there aren't going to be like 10 things you could write about. So you're going to have to look very closely at the sources to find the differences in the first place. Why is there such a tight focus? Well, one of the reasons is because it makes sure there's no crossover with what you'll go on to write about in question 4. And many of you have asked me that, well, can't we write the same things? No, the wording of the question will be such that, there isn't that crossover. So the second thing to say is you have to actually be able to infer in this question. So the lowest marks will be awarded to those students who write very simple statements of difference. And this is an example. Mr. Bruff has a laugh, but Mr. Thompson is serious. And this is not incorrect, but it's just very basic. The next levels of marks as you go through, that might be a level 1. For a level 2, you're starting to infer. You're starting to say something that is not stated in the text, but that you have worked out. In other words, you're saying, okay, if this is a difference between the two things I've been asked to focus upon, what does that lead me to realize about them? What can I infer about them, given that that's a difference? So given that the difference is Mr. Bruff has a laugh, but Mr. Thompson is serious, what can I infer from that? Okay, and what I've got in the ebook and the revision guide is this slowly improving answer where you'll see, in this case, the underlying sections of the answer becoming more and more of the answer. And this is the inference. This is where I've said, okay, given that that's the difference, what can I actually understand about the two from that difference? So given that, as I very simply stated at the beginning, Mr. Bruff has a laugh, but Mr. Thompson is serious, I can improve my mark by saying, well, Mr. Bruff has an informal attitude, as he often laughs and beams, emphasizing his passion and sense of humor, reflecting the non-controlling attitude he has to education. He puts the students and their needs before himself. Thompson, however, uses a much more formal tone and vocabulary, such as expounding upon. This formal tone is used to emphasize the difference in status between himself and Mr. Woollock, to whom he writes. Thompson clearly has a defined role of authority, which he is clearly protecting and projecting in this letter. Now what you see in this answer is the underlined parts of the answer are the inference, where I have worked out something. It's not stated in the text. I have inferred from the simple difference. I've made an inference about what I've been asked to focus upon. And that's what you've got to do to get the highest marks. And as I said, this is covered in more detail in the revision guide and the video that I just mentioned. So, two clear things to work on for paper 2 question 2, identifying clear differences between the two sources, and once you've identified those differences, being able to infer, being able to say something about what you've been asked to focus upon, and it's not clearly stated in the text, you've had to work it out yourself. One final thing I will talk about is referring to time periods. Now, obviously, the two sources are always going to be taken from different time periods, but you will not get any marks for just stating one is 19th century, the other is 21st century. You can use that information about one being 19th century, one being 21st century, as the basis of an inference of difference, but referring to the time period when the sources were written is not of itself a valid difference to identify, and you don't have to do that. So a lot of people have asked me that question before as well. But the key thing is inference, and that's why I like this question, because you wouldn't know that if you didn't look at the mark scheme or watch my videos or whatever, or your teacher hadn't explained it to you. But it really is about inference, and if you can infer something from the differences you found, you're going to achieve higher marks. So I hope you found this useful. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already.